Good afternoon and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. Today we are joined by Lucio Simoni, Engineering Manager at BC Group. Webinar Wednesday would like to thank our sponsor BC Group. BC Group International is a biomedical test equipment manufacturer and distributor for over 75 brands of products. BC Group's flagship brand is BC Biomedical. BC Group sells direct and through distributors both domestically and internationally. The group provides equipment to medical device manufacturers, independent service companies, and hospital biomedical and clinical engineering departments. So for more information, please visit bcgroupstore.com. Just a quick reminder about our Fall MD Expo. We're headed to the Caribe Royal Hotel in Orlando, Florida from October the 29th to the 31st. So please join us for 3 days of education, networking, and the latest advances in medical technology products and services. Registration is now open, so for more details, please visit mdexposhow.com. Also, a copy of the pre-show planner can be found in the handout section of your webinar dashboard. Today's webinar is eligible for 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit from the ACI, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. Let's kick off today's webinar by giving away one of our Webinar Wednesday t-shirts to the attendee that can tell me the answer to the following trivia question. August is National Golf Month. The season-ending FedEx Cup for the PGA Tour comes to an iconic golf course in Atlanta in 2 weeks. What is the name of the course and what famous player grew up playing it? Answer now using the questions feature on your dashboard, and I'll reveal the answer at the end of the webinar. We'll wrap up today's presentation with a live Q&A, so please submit your questions anytime using the questions feature on the webinar dashboard. As I mentioned earlier, our presenter today is Lucio Simoni, and he will be discussing infusion pump testing with the IPA 3100.
Hi, I'm Lucio Simoni. I am the Engineering Manager for BC Group. In this series of videos, we'll be demonstrating the IPA 3100 Infusion Pump Analyzer. We'll demonstrate all the features and how to run all the tests that you need to perform on your infusion pump. All right, here's a first look at our IPA 3100. This is the latest infusion pump analyzer from BC Biomedical. We can see here from our home screen, this is the view that we get when we turn the unit on. We have easy access in our color touchscreen to get to flow testing, occlusion testing, and also draining the unit. Up at the top, we can see our battery status indicator. We've got system settings on the right, and we can view our data logs on the left up here. We have a built-in stylus for getting to some of those smaller buttons for the keypad and entering text. And then on the side, we've got our power switch and a charge indicator. We're running from internal batteries. We also have a power input that's clearly marked. This is for charging the batteries or running for long periods of time. We've got a USB connection on the side. This is a micro USB for connecting to our computer, getting records off the unit. On the other side, we have our clearly marked input and output connections to go to the infusion pump. For navigation, we just select which test we want to perform, either flow test or occlusion tests. We can drain the module just by pressing the drain button. It will automatically clear any fluid that's useful for when we need to ship the unit, where it might be exposed to freezing temperatures. We've got our settings right at the top. This is a cool feature that we've got in this unit with our color screen. Now we have QR codes. We can take you directly to the product page, or the user manual is available. I can scan those with my phone and get right to the information that I need. And this unit contains the latest flow module design, which is also independent of bubbles. Those won't affect the test or won't cancel the test if a bubble happens to flow through the unit while you're performing a test. To view the system settings from the main screen, we press the gear button at the top right. That shows us the software version, firmware version, and calibration due date. Now this one's important because as we get closer to our calibration due date, there'll be a notice on the main screen saying that your calibration is due soon or your calibration is past due. We also have a product information button, which gives us a link directly to the BC store page where you can see information about the IPA 3100, such as these videos and other training videos, as well as the accessories and other features that are available. We have a direct link to the user manual, so if you want to read that and get the device specifications or more details about the operation of the unit. At the bottom of the screen, we have a few icons for changing the pressure. We have a few pressure ranges available: PSI, millimeters of mercury, millibars, or kilopascals. We can also adjust the screen brightness using the light bulb. We have a calendar and clock to adjust the date and time. We have options for either month, day, year format or day, month, year. And for time, we can select either 12 or 24-hour format. The save icon allows us to turn on or off autosave. That's the feature that every time we run a test, at the end of the test, if autosave is turned on, it will save that test record to the database. Or we can turn that off to manually save tests as we run them. Bluetooth, we can turn that on or off. Bluetooth is built in on this unit, and we can turn that off if we want to conserve battery life, or we can leave it on here in this setting. We also have a link directly to myBC Mobile for either Apple or Google devices. And on the main screen, we also have at the top left an icon to get into our data log. This shows us all of the tests that we've run. We can scroll through those on the right over here. We can go back to our home screen. And if we press on the battery indicator, we'll get a numerical display for the remaining battery life. Before we can run a flow test, we need to prime our pump. So I'm going to show you a cool feature that we have built into the IPA 3100. If we actually go to the drain mode, that will force fluid to be pumped through the unit. And if you've ever worked with the Alaris pump before, you'll know, and most infusion pumps, they're very sensitive to bubbles. So we have to prime the tubing in order to make sure we get all the bubbles out of the system. Now we can see the fluid passing through the tubing here. And we know if we leave any of these bubbles in there, the pump is going to complain, it's going to cancel the test, it's going to have lots of problems. So what we can do is just leave the infusion pump analyzer in the drain mode, and it's going to continue to pump all of these bubbles out. And now here we can see that some bubbles are stuck in the tubing, right? If I were to run a flow test with that, the bubbles may come through and cancel my test. So all I have to do is flick the tubing a little bit while we're in this drain mode, and it's actually going to pull fresh fluid all the way through. And now we've got a bubble stuck down here. We just get that to flow through the unit. There's another one. And once we get all of these out of the tubing, I want to make sure we knock these loose. Now they're past the bubble detection sensor, and we should be ready for testing. Okay, so I'll stop the drain mode, and now we can load the cartridge and continue with our flow test. Okay, now we have the tubing primed. We're ready to load the cartridge into the pump. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. Now we go to flow test, and this shows us the configuration for the flow test that we're going to run. We can pick a start mode, which is either manual or auto. The manual will start the test immediately when I hit start on the analyzer. Auto, I can start the test and it won't actually start counting time until it detects flow. That makes it more automated for me. So I'm going to go ahead and select auto. The volume is how much volume we're expecting to deliver. The flow rate is the expected flow rate. These are used for calculating percent error. And then the duration is how long we think the test should run. So we can pick our end condition to be either manual stop, or based on the duration that we programmed, the volume that we programmed, or duration and volume. It has to meet both conditions. So I'm going to set it to volume just to be able to run our test. We hit proceed to test, and now it's ready to go. So the IPA 3100 doesn't know that I primed, because I primed using the drain function, so I kind of tricked it. So now it thinks you need to prime. Well, we just did that, so prime is done, it's ready to go. And now we need to configure the infusion pump. So I'm going to turn that on here and configure the pump to match the settings that we have on the infusion pump analyzer. We're going to let the system boot up. And configure the channel. We said 200 milliliters per hour and 20 milliliters. And now it's ready to go. The IPA 3100 screen shows me the configuration at the bottom. I've got my programmed volume, flow, duration, and end condition. At the top, it tells me that it's ready to start, so it's ready to go. And I have my start button right here. So all I have to do is press that, and now it's ready to start the test. It's waiting for the flow to begin. Once it detects flow, then it's going to start the time. If I had select manual for the start mode, the timer would be running right now, and it would be accumulating time. And it calculates the flow rate by volume over time. So this allows me to do whatever configuration I need to on the pump. I don't have to worry about pushing this button and pushing that button at exactly the same time. The auto mode just waits, and as soon as it detects flow, it starts measuring. So I started the flow on the pump, and then I've got measurements on the screen. So it's going to show me the average flow. Up at the top is the instantaneous flow. And what we'll see, this number is going to bounce around a little bit because, you know, inside the pump it has fingers that it's using, and sometimes it moves faster and it has to cycle through those fingers. So that instantaneous flow is going to be all over the place. We've got a accumulated time at the top, and then our measured volume and average flow shown in the middle of the screen. Now, the calculated error, it looks really large right now, again, because it's using the configuration that I had initially. I told it I was going to do 20 milliliter dispense, and I'm not anywhere near that right now. So once we get to the end of the test, that's when we can compare the volume. But the average flow runs continuously as the test is running. Now we can also see that we can't get out of the screen because the test is active. So really, when you're running the test, you need to stay in the screen. So we can go ahead and stop this test at any time just by pressing the stop button. We don't have to wait. The end condition is just an auto end. That's when the test will automatically stop if we want to configure that to happen. But I can go ahead and stop this test now. And we can hear in the background, the pump is running internally to make sure that we don't have pressure built up in the system. That'll always happen in the background, that's normal. When I stop the pump, that will also stop because now I don't have any flow. So now at the top of the screen, we can see that the test is complete. It says done. We can save this record to our data log by pressing the save function here. And I'll show you another setting later on in another video. We'll show how to do autosave so that I don't have to worry about remembering to press that button at the end of the test. But if I don't want to save every single test that I do, I only want to save select records. This shows the manual save. That's been saved. I can go back and run another test. I can change my configuration and run a different flow rate or a different volume and continue on with that. Now, I also have a tab over here for DUT information. That allows me to save the information about the DUT that I'm testing, the device under test. In this case, I've got a Alaris infusion pump. We can change any of these fields by just clicking on one of the fields and changing the information there. This is also where it's handy to have the stylus. If I get into some of these keys and they're a little too small for me, or if I accidentally hit the wrong key, the stylus really is helpful for getting the exact button that you need. Okay? We can also clear all of the text over at the right here by pressing the clear all. Just an easy way to enter information about the device under test. Now, if I'm really not worried about that information, I just want to gather data, I don't have to enter this data, but it does show up in the test record when I'm finished. It shows me what device was being tested and that the test record as well. So it's nice to enter that information if you would like that to be part of your record. To perform occlusion testing, we select Occlusion Test from the main screen. We already have our tubing primed and the pump ready to run. We have the option of selecting either manual or auto start mode. Just like the flow test, the manual test will immediately start counting time as soon as I start the test. The auto mode will wait until it detects flow from the pump until it runs the timer. I can also enter the information about the device under test that I'm using. And I press start. And that takes me to the testing screen. I can see here that it's ready to start. It's giving me the pressure, the current pressure that's in the tubing right now. And again, the timer hasn't started because I set it to auto. When I start the test, now it's ready. It's waiting for the pressure. As soon as it sees pressure from the pump, I'm going to restart the pump here. It's going to start flowing. As soon as it saw pressure, it started measuring time. And now it's going to tell us exactly when the occlusion occurs and the current pressure in the tubing. So there's our pressure. We can see the pump stop because the pressure is starting to decrease. It's showing me the peak pressure and how long it took to reach that peak. I'm going to stop the pump so it stops yelling at me. And then when I stop the test, now I have the option to save. Again, I have the unit set to manual save, so it won't save every single record that I perform, but I do like this one, so I'm going to save the record. So now we can see the test is complete. It's ready to start a new test. All I would need to do is press the start button here and start my infusion pump, and it would run a new test. But what I'd like to do is just take a look at the data log and see the test that just ran. So I can look at that record here, and we can see it shows me the peak pressure, what time it occurred, and how long did the test run completely, the elapsed time. Okay, so if we take a look at our configuration here, we've got an Alaris infusion pump. We've got that connected to a T where I can inject a bubble. And out of the T goes to the IPA 3100, and then the outlet of the IPA 3100 goes back to our tank where we have our water. I've got the infusion pump set for 500 milliliters per hour just to give it, make it go a little faster. And I've got 200 milliliters set for dispense. Again, the rates don't matter. This is just for demonstration purposes. So on the IPA 3100, I'll go into the flow test. Again, I'm not really worried about accuracy, but I'm still going to set it to the same settings. So I have 500 milliliters per hour for the flow rate and 200 milliliters for the dispense, even though we're not going to do that full dispense. Now, I'm going to start the test here, so it's ready to go. It's prepared. All I have to do is start the pump, and we'll start measuring our flow rate. So we can see we detected that flow. We're getting measurements on the screen, and everything seems to be running normally. We can see the instantaneous flow rate up in the top right, and our average flow rate over here. There's a large error for the calculated, or for the measured volume, just because we haven't reached our target, and we're nowhere near our target, so of course there's a lot of error. Now, what's important is the test is running, it's stable, we've got a steady stream of fluid coming in, and we've got a steady stream of fluid coming out. So there's no air in the system right now. So what I'm going to do is switch my valve here, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce some air into the test, and we can see here we've got some large bubbles running in. Now imagine you're running a low flow test and it's been about 20 hours into your test process, and you've got another 20 hours to go, and a bubble dislodges from one of your fittings and it goes into your equipment, canceling your test. So that could be a big deal. We've seen a lot of air, several large bubbles come into the system. They're working their way through the internals of the IPA 3100. And here we can see they've worked their way out. So the test has continued. It hasn't affected our measurements, hasn't affected the readings, and more importantly, it hasn't canceled the test. So that's something we can offer as a function, as a feature that we've mentioned in the past in other videos. We've mentioned that we don't have any effect on bubbles. Bubbles don't affect our tests, and so here we can see that in action. That really is the case. Another thing we can demonstrate here is that it really doesn't matter how I have the IPA 3100 oriented. Whether I'm doing a low flow test or a high flow test, I can hang this from a IV pole, I can set it on my desk, I can put it on its side, I can have this unit anywhere that I need to, that it'll fit in my luxurious workspace that I have, and it really doesn't affect anything. So that's another benefit we have to this system, is that the orientation of the analyzer doesn't affect the readings or the measurements, regardless of what flow rate we're running. In this segment, we're going to be using myBC Mobile to perform infusion pump testing using the IPA 3100. We're going to demonstrate flow testing, occlusion testing, and what all the settings mean, how to run the test, and how to get our test results out of myBC Mobile once we're done. Okay, so here we can see we've got the infusion pump already connected to the IPA 3100. We've got the lines primed and ready for testing. We've covered that in another video. We've got the drain already connected, and we've got myBC Mobile running at the welcome screen. So now at this point, we're ready to perform any testing that we need to do. So I've already got the infusion pump connected. We've primed the tubing. We're connected to the IPA 3100. We've demonstrated in other videos how to do all of that. What we're going to do here is just perform the testing using the myBC Mobile app. So I've got the phone started up. It's running the myBC Mobile. And when you start the program, it defaults to this home screen. It lets you know who is using the software, who's logged in, which assets are going to be tested. We can either use the barcode scanner to scan the barcode of the instrument we're testing, or we can select from a list of devices. And here we've got the asset programmed in already, so I can select that asset on myBC Mobile. And then I can tell it that I want to do some testing. So I go through and I press the test button. Now I'm prompted with what equipment do I want to use. So we're going to select the IPA 3100. And right now we have two displayed because there's two close by that it can find using the Bluetooth. So I'll go into my settings and I'll confirm that this is the serial number 1001. And now we can see that unit on myBC Mobile. I'm going to go back to the asset, and if Bluetooth is turned off, so what happens there? So then we can go through and we can start our test, and we say we can do a refresh, and now it shouldn't find that unit anymore. So now we can say, what unit do I have? 1001. Why doesn't it show up in myBC Mobile? Well, Bluetooth isn't turned on, so we check that setting. Now it's Bluetooth is turned on, and we do a refresh in myBC Mobile. Now it should find the unit. We can confirm 1001 is the unit we want to test with. And then it's going to confirm the asset information. So do you have the right asset selected? We can double check our equipment and make sure we've got the right serial number selected. Yes, that's the one. And then we can run our testing. At this point, I have the same selections at the top that I do from the main screen. So I can either do flow testing or occlusion testing or adjust my settings. And we're going to do a flow test. So then we have to select, how do we want the test to start? Is it going to be an automatic start? So this tells it as soon as the flow is detected to start measuring the flow rate, or the manual selection. And that starts the timer. As soon as I hit start, it starts the timer and starts collecting data. And I'm going to set my volume at 20 milliliters. And if we run at 200 milliliters per hour, that test should take 6 minutes. So we have an option at the bottom for how do we want to end the test. I can select no automatic end. That means that I have to stop the test manually. Or we can stop the test when we hit our duration of 6 minutes and we can compare our measurements. Or we can do volume, or we can do volume and duration. If I pick volume, then it will run until it measures 20 milliliters of fluid, and then it will give you a result based on what it measured for flow rate and volume. Or we can do both duration and volume, where I have to hit 6 minutes and I have to deliver 20 milliliters. Both conditions have to occur. So it would have to be greater than 6 minutes and at least 20 milliliters for the test to stop. So I'm just going to pick duration. We'll run a 6-minute test and see how the results go from there. So now in myBC Mobile, the test is configured. We can see on the screen, it's showing me the results of the previous test because I haven't started this one yet. But at the bottom, we can see targets. So the targets for the test are 20 milliliters per hour, 200 milliliters per hour for 20 milliliter delivery, and it should be a 6-minute test, and it's set for duration as the end condition. So when I hit start, the pump is, the meter is ready to measure. As soon as I start the pump, it's going to start measuring. So now we have to set up the pump. So we'll turn on our pump. We already have it primed, so all we have to do is program it for the same settings that we put in the 3100. So we'll just say we're a new patient, and we're testing channel A for a rate of 200 milliliters per hour. And a volume infusion of 20 milliliters. And then all we have to do, the IPA is ready to go, BC Mobile is ready to go. We just hit start, and as soon as the pump starts, it detected the flow, started the timer, and now the test is running. So that gives me a chance to, I don't have to worry about starting both at exactly the same time. If I were to do the manual start, then I would have to press start on the infusion pump at the same time as I press start on the IPA 3100 or the myBC mobile app. As it's running, we can see that it's displaying the percent error for both flow rate and volume as the test runs. And that's going to continue to run even when we stop the test. If I stop it manually, so we can see now the pump I didn't stop, so I'm going to stop the pump. It was still running in the background, but it wasn't collecting any of that data. So it doesn't hurt anything to stop the pump later, but it won't update any data on the test. The test has stopped as soon as I press stop. And we can see on the myBC mobile app, we've got all of the measurements. It shows me the measurements down here. It shows the test configuration and the test device, the device under test information up at the top. And that matches the information shown on the IPA 3100. So I can save this information to the log. That saves it to the BC mobile log. If I want to save it to the IPA 3100, I would press save on that screen. And now we can see that if we want to view that record, we can go back to the home screen and look at our records, and that's the test record that we ran. So at this point I can either delete or send the record. I can send it by text message or email, or I can also export the record, and that creates a data file that I can also email to myself. We can print that out, save it to a PDF, to incorporate into our CMMS system. So that's a flow test. The IPA 3100 shows that the test was complete. We didn't run it for the full duration, so we don't have, the calculated error on volume is pretty high because it didn't get to the 6 milliliters that I programmed. And the flow rate error just shows that's what it collected in that period of time. So if we were to let it run on its own, it would have stopped and given us a little better readings, but we stopped it pretty quickly. So then we can go back to the myBC Mobile, and we'll say we're going to run another test on this instrument. And this time we're going to run a occlusion test. So we're going to show the settings here. Again, we have auto or manual start. I'm going to go to auto. And that's all I really need to configure on the BC Mobile. We'll show on the 3100. I'm just going to leave it on the screen. This is at the screen that was doing the flow test. And so we'll see when I start this test, it automatically updated the screen. It configured the settings. It's showing me the current pressure measurement that's live. And we can see that the elapsed time hasn't started yet. So when I start the pump, it's going to start this timer and then we'll get our occlusion test. So I'm going to press start on the BC Mobile. That started the test. We can see the 3100. It's waiting pressure. So if I restart the pump, it's going to trigger that test. It started measuring. It started counting time. And it's monitoring the pressure that's coming in, and it's recording the peak pressure. And it's telling us when that occurred. And we can see on myBC Mobile, it's showing the same information on the screen here. So we got an occlusion. The pump stopped. It tested an occlusion, detected occlusion, and it stopped pumping. So we can see when that occurred. That occurred at 13 seconds, and the pressure was 10.175 psi. Now at this point, we can press stop to finish that test. And we can see the pump in the background, the IPA, just eliminated that pressure that had built up. And now we have our test results, same as before. We can save it to our log. So that's been saved. Now I can run another test or go back to flow testing, do more occlusion testing, or in the system settings, I can change which pressure. I'm going to go ahead and turn off this pump. So we can adjust our settings. We can select the pressure that's used during the occlusion test. We have the same options on BC Mobile that we do on the IPA 3100. So we can change those settings here or just see what they're set to. On the 3100, if we want to save that record, we just press the save button on the screen. Thank you for watching, and for more information about BC Group products, please visit us on the web at bcgroupstore.com.
Thanks so much, Lucio. I've got a few questions that have come in. Are you ready?
Sure am. That sounds good.
Okay, the first question here is, what is the maximum flow rate that can be measured?
So the IPA 3100 can measure up to 1,000 milliliters per hour.
Okay, and so how long does the battery last?
The internal battery can run, it really depends on how you're using the unit. If you're running high flow rates, then it's moving a lot more than if it was a low flow rate. So and then also if it's just sitting idle. So if you're sitting idle, it should last around 12 hours, of total runtime. And if you're doing flow tests, you can expect 3 to 4 hours of continuous flow measurements. So if you need to run a test that's longer than that, then you just need to plug in the power adapter on the side, and then you can run it indefinitely.
Okay, and can I test a syringe pump with this unit?
Absolutely. So the 3100, you can pretty much use any pump that you have, with the exception of PCA pumps. So anything with a bolus delivery, if you're looking to measure the time in between boluses or the bolus volume, that sort of thing for a PCA pump, you would need the IPA 3400, which has that additional measurement mode. So the 3100 here, this can measure all the pumps except for PCA.
Okay, and what's the accuracy?
So the accuracy is, that's a good question. I believe it does depend on flow rate. That's funny. You stumped me there. I don't have that one in my head. But that is available on our website and on the product literature. We can look that up here in a minute.
Okay, what about how often must you prime the tester, and does it digitally occlude?
So priming, basically anytime you change the connection on the side or you connect to a new pump, you would need to reprime. And that's really for the pump itself, to make sure that you get the bubbles out of the administration set for the pump, itself, to make sure that it doesn't detect any bubbles. We kind of demonstrated while the test is running, it doesn't matter if a bubble flows into the IPA 3100, but if your pump itself detects a bubble, then it will create an alarm. So yeah, anytime you change the tubing or change your connections over here, you should reprime.
Okay, so how many pumps can the analyzer check at one time? Can it handle multiple channel IV pumps such as the Plum 360 or Alaris?
Oh, that's a good question. So this particular unit, the 3100, can only measure one infusion pump at a time. And now while that pump is connected, you can do, your occlusion testing and your flow testing. You can do all the tests that you need to do, or multiple tests on that one pump. But for measuring multiple channel pumps, you would need to use a IPA 3400, which gives you up to 4 channels. So back to your question about accuracy. So I mentioned it depends on the flow rate. So for up to 700 milliliters per hour, our accuracy is 1%. And then when you go from 700 to 1,000 milliliters per hour, the accuracy is 2% of reading. So good question.
Okay, great. Okay, another question here is, you seem to have the water supply at the same level as the pump, but I know the Alaris pump is totally gravity dependent. How does this work?
So the Alaris pump, really we measure the output of the pump. So it really depends on what comes into our unit. So regardless of whether you have the water level above the pump or below the pump, if that affects the pump specifications, then that's dependent on the pump itself. But it won't affect our measurements of the output of the pump.
Okay, that's great. We haven't got any more questions coming at this time, but so I think we can wrap up, Lucio. If attendees would like to get in contact with you, what is the best way?
Email works best. Either I don't know if you have my contact information there, or sales at BC Group, intl.com. That works the best. Or give us a call at 314-638-3800.
Perfect. So thank you, Lucio, for your time and for a great and informative presentation. I'd like to encourage everyone to visit today's sponsor to learn more about the services they provide for our industry. So please visit bcgroupstore.com. And as promised, the answer to today's trivia question is Eastlake and Bobby Jones. So congratulations to our winner, Tom Cockler. Just a quick reminder, you can obtain your certificate by completing the post-webinar survey, which will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1CE credit from the ACI, and you'll be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, you can reach us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. We'll be back next week with another webinar, so please visit webinarwednesday.live for more details and complimentary registration. Thank you all for your time today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.